If I had one channel that I was restricted to using, it would be referral, and being able to leverage one user to invite another user or multiple.
Many people, small business owners, have grown incredibly frustrated with marketing through digital channels. When things do go wrong, what steps should people do to protect themselves?
The agency model is entirely dead. Big agencies and small agencies that I personally on my team worked in our space especially, there's just a lack of discovery in depth that they've done to be able to come to me with ideas that I would argue that if I gave the same brief to an agency as to some of my young interns, I can get better quality work for my interns.
Today's guest is the Chief Global Marketing Officer for Binance, which now has 285 million users, and their goal is to double that in the next 3 years. How do you penetrate my feed in a way that will get my attention?
Oscars, Grammys, how do we capitalize? We call it trend catching. So it's looking at what's mainstream at that moment and how can we insert Binance and crypto into that conversation in a way that is appropriate and relevant and relatable.
I am a big fan of all things crypto. I'm also every single day wondering why your whole industry seems to want to confuse the hell out of everybody and not make it easy. And then as I say that, I say to myself, doesn't every industry do the same?
That's true. I think across industries we've seen, whether it's from like social media to B2B SaaS operations to finance originally, now to crypto, we always try and complicate things rather than just, and focus on the technology or how it's built.
Yeah.
And I think we really just need to focus on the benefits and why it's relevant to you or your dad or my sister. It's something that we try to kind of embrace at Binance and focus more on the user.
It's like I suppose it's like trying to get a software developer or a programmer to try and sell something. It's probably not going to work, is it?
It's funny. I think I look back I'm old, so I've had a couple of times around in different roles, and I think the company that really broke the mold of being able to simplify and translate technology is Google. And I do look at their marketing. And if you look at the storytelling over, the 15 years since their inception, it's always focused on why it's relevant for you. And I think that's something that has to be embraced by technology companies, because if you have software or builders or technologists explaining their product, oftentimes you lose them.
Yeah.
So the role of marketing and, jobs like mine and my broader teams is really to act as that translator so that it's very simple for the person that's sitting on the other side to immediately break down what it is.
I get it.
So, and I think crypto is something that, look, it's not just an asset class. It's a disruptive technology, that could transform the entire and is starting to transform the entire financial system. So that's a lot for an everyday person to take in.
Well, as a marketing person,
yes,
because your core is you're a CMO of Binance, but the fact is you're a marketing person.
Yes.
And if you look at your previous experience, it's not been in the digital asset space. It's been in other, very interesting areas, but not digital assets. So when you first decided, to accept a role in a company like this, what percentage of your new role, including bringing across the skills and the experience that you've got, and what percentage of that new role was like, holy macaroni, I've got a whole world to learn here?
One of the reasons I was so compelled to enter into this industry and saw such huge potential from it. First of all, I love what is the mission of financial literacy for all and accessible products, because while you and I are very lucky with our background, there's still 1.7 billion people unbanked. So there is still a huge problem that we need to solve with the current financial system. But one of the reasons that I was so attracted to this space is I've been really lucky over the 20 years of my career to have seen and been at the kind of first point of entry of lots of disruptive technologies coming into marketing, like social media, like performance marketing, content so platforms, like everything transformed during that period. And what I realized is, while I was a creative artist agency and we had a flurry of founders in blockchain and crypto and fintech coming to us being like, we need mainstream awareness. We need our brand to be the brand that everyone knows. And they assumed that spending millions of dollars and putting that logo on a backdrop was going to achieve that. What I realized is that actually there was so many skills from the Web 2 space, as we describe it, that if we bring them into Web 3, would be able, like, it's a perfect marriage. You're able to really make the concepts relatable. So I think for me, it's like 50-50. But at the same time, at my stage in career in Web3, in the Web 2 space, so in traditional marketing, oftentimes you're the most knowledgeable person in the room.
Mhm.
Whereas now, when I go into a room with my colleagues and with my peers and with the engineers, I'm the least knowledgeable often. So I'm constantly challenged every day on new concepts that I'm learning and understanding about that are going to keep evolving and making kind of the digital asset space even better. So I would say it's 50-50. But for someone, at my stage, at my tenure in my career, being able to still be afraid going into a room and
Mhm.
be fearful of, like, can I understand this? Will I be able to break this down?
Yeah.
Like, that's a privilege as well.
Yeah.
And being able to bring then that separate skill set. So yeah, it's probably 50-50 to answer more specifically.
Okay. And when we look at all of these exchanges out there, I mean, Binance is the behemoth out there. You guys, I suppose, and Coinbase are the two bigger ones that most people will know the brands of, followed by the crypto.coms and the Bybits and stuff. But whether it's crypto assets or any other type of exchange out there, it's very hard for people to make a decision. Now, how do you choose which exchange to use? If I'm going to be trading from or buying some of this crypto stuff from my laptop or my mobile phone, how do I choose somebody? And whilst you've got such a huge land grab still available to you, how does a company like Binance approach that?
For us, we're very lucky. We just hit 85 million users,
Right.
and we're operating in 180 countries. And I'm very grateful. I've been with Binance 3 years, but I'm very grateful for the foundations that the founders of Binance put into place, where they reinforced being user centric and obsessive. And I'll explain some of the ways in which we're obsessive about our users. But secondly, they reinforced about consistency in all operations. So consistency and excellence in customer service, consistency and excellence in terms of product and the services that we provide, consistency and excellency in marketing and how we ensure that we are the best at delivering and meeting people where they are at their journey, whether they be someone that's totally new in this industry or someone that's an older investor, OG, as we term them, but also consistency in security and obsessiveness about compliance. And I think we've been on a big journey as an industry, all of us, Binance included. Lots of headwinds, lots of volatility. We're coming to a time now where there's more clarity in the space, not just because of the US, we're seeing it everywhere. And I think one of the main ways in which Binance really stood out from there is being consistent, so that community members knew, and we call them community members, but our users knew what they were getting, and that they weren't going to suddenly try and get into their app and it wouldn't be available anymore, or they wouldn't be able to access their funds. Because, look, we're safeguarding people's funds.
Mm.
That's the most important asset many people have, whether it's a small amount or a large amount,
Mhm.
other than friends, family, and homes.
Yeah.
So it's something, I think it's the consistency, and ensuring that we operate with them. We like to think of ourselves as the world's largest local exchange. And while we are large and we cover a lot of countries, we're very localized to that country. And that goes across the gamut of, like, all of our operations. And I think that's really what attracted that next level of support, from our users, which has helped us continuously grow.
285 million, did you say?
Yes.
Okay, so 285 million users. How does a business go from what would be the strategy? Come on, I want marketing
You want marketing
insights here.
insights. Well, I
So
think just
what I want people to understand is, because I know these questions are being asked of
yeah,
me to ask you today, so I
yeah,
need
yeah,
to do these things, all
yeah.
right? So whether you've got 285 or million or 285, to me, it doesn't really matter right this minute. It's like, from where you are,
Mhm.
if the goal was, right, over the next 3 years we're going to double it. Let's say that was a business
That
plan.
is the
Yeah.
goal.
Okay.
Keeps me up at night.
So with and again, I know this. We now have 6 asset classes in the world. We have 5 for many years. Now we have a 6th asset class, and I would argue that was debatable until probably 3 years ago,
Mm.
when it became so cemented in that no, you can't argue, and when ETFs started to be produced and offered.
December 2023, pivotal moment in
Yeah,
our industry, mainstream.
that's right. That whole
Yeah.
message, and with what's coming on with
Mhm.
the other stuff as well. But it's like it now became a 6th asset class. Lots of exchanges won't accept crypto, okay, that exist, traditional ones today. And so a lot of people have had to go and get a separate account almost somewhere where they can buy and sell whatever crypto they want to do, rather than have it all combined. Now, from a marketing point of view, if you were to go through most airports and look at the Swiss banks, okay, the adverts that you see, okay, are some, I'm going to just be level and say it straight, some wanky sailboat across a lake somewhere.
Aspirational.
Yeah, and
You could be Lake Como with
security.
Clooney.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. It's like security, a carrick of this, and all
Yeah.
that kind of foundation and safety and trust and loyalty, all that. And whether that's Sock Gen or whether that's, I don't know, you Julius Baer, it doesn't matter which one. They all kind of do the same thing with a different,
Sea of sameness.
yeah,
You could switch out the
with a
brands.
different color palette. Okay, and if you see an animated or a video format, it was just pretty much the same. So how do you choose a private bank? How do you choose an investment bank to work with? Very hard for an individual to make a decision on that. And so if you have to grow from 285 million to double in the next 3 years, there's the word of mouth value, which is Maureen, who's got one, and she tells her son or her husband or her brother, and he gets up an account. And if you could get everyone that was a client of yours just to get one person to open an account, then you'd double, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But what would
It's not a bad idea.
but trust me, it's not a bad idea.
No, we've got a strong referral program. Very, very healthy incentives for
good.
you.
So
But it's not just one. You could bring up to 10. So.
Yeah, really. To me, it's like, I want to know from you. You sit down with a whiteboard, and it's like, right, how do we do this? What would be the first steps you'd have to go through to try and work out what the strategy would be? And then school me here.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what would you have to avoid like the plague? And then what would you have to consider, because of here we've got VARA as the regulator, but any regulator, so that you could still execute and get your double number of users in the next 3 years?
So for us, one of the beauties of our industry is because we were the outlier at the beginning. And the competitive advantage we had is that the traditional exchanges didn't want to play in this space.
Yeah.
So it meant that for a relatively short amount of time, our founders, not just Binance, but across the industry, were able to build without threat of competition. And we're able to build like from the ground up. And
Right.
that level of expertise and knowledge, I'll give an analogy. It's like AI. AI, I've been working on AI projects for 10 years. One of the first campaigns I worked with in AI was IBM Watson. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But now it's on everyone's tongue.
Mm-hmm.
But the builders that have been building AI products, AI services, AI agents haven't just been in business for the last 3 to 12 months.
Yeah.
They've been building for 10 years. They have like unparalleled knowledge, access, ability to understand what's required next. And I would liken that to the crypto industry. So the centralized exchanges, as I call them, they had that competitive advantage to be able to build and to really focus on what those core users who were fully invested in crypto, weren't cynical about it, wanted. So that's amazing access to have. What I think they married on top of that was they made finance fun. And if I look at this next chapter, finance, if you spoke to me 20 years ago and you said finance can be fun, I would be like, no, finance marketing, that's like serious, and we have to be trusted, and you can't do anything that would make anyone feel. But actually, what we did is we built a community around finance. So, when I talk about our 285 million users, many of them form part of this extended family or community that we refer to. I go to events all over the world now. I turn up and there's 1,000 sometimes people that are early stage Binance and investors that are there to learn more, understand more. They're wearing our swag. They're fully embracing what is the Binance brand because we taught them and invited them into a world that helped them improve their life.
Mm.
So on top of like making it entertaining but educational at the same time, we also opened up doors for many of those people. And actually, when you talk about word of mouth, they've been some of the most compelling stories. Oftentimes you meet financial influencers in the crypto space and you ask them about their stories. They weren't Ivy League graduates.
Mm.
They were people, valets,
Mm-hmm.
they were kitchen porters. They
Oh, room,
were
supermarket, yeah.
they were individuals that saw, Bitcoin referred to on the Blacklist, that Hollywood
Yeah, yeah,
series,
yeah.
back in 2015, and were intrigued to understand like how they could use it to make their life better. And I think that's what's been standalone about our industry is not just the wealth narrative and it's also about you being able to be a better version of yourself and empowering you and giving you the tools to lift yourself out of what is
Mhm.
that opportunity. And I think that's been the reason why, to this point, it hasn't been the institutional and the private, family offices and the wealth managers that have driven this industry.
Mm.
It's been the everyday person on the street. It's been the retail user.
So it's almost the antithesis, isn't it? It's the guy that never dresses like me. And it is though, isn't it?
Exactly. It's been the person that maybe was not the Julius Baers or the, traditional private wealth managers wouldn't pay any attention to them.
Yeah.
So they felt welcomed in by a financial world that made them comfortable, met them where they are, helped educate them more, and helped them understand how to enter into
Do you
it.
think there was an element of some people kind of like didn't start with much, were well, I'm trying not to say the word desperate, but maybe to some
I
degree,
do think it was, yeah, I
desperate
think they, I
to
think
find a way to accelerate or get ahead or leapfrog or catch up maybe from where everybody else seemed to be going. And by investing time learning about this, it maybe opened their eyes to the fact, well, hold on a minute, there actually might just be a shortcut here. And if you trust the process, you might benefit from it.
I personally think that was one of the main motivating factors of it goes into performance of people wanting to be a better version of themselves and seeing the digital assets and crypto space as that route forward
Mm.
of not because the traditional system didn't pay any attention to them.
Yeah.
So it was an opportunity for them to enter into a space. There's so many minimums to start on traditional trading exchanges. I was in Turkey last year and I met this incredible, like 65-year-old Turkish woman. I presumed, and this is the reminder of never judge a book by its cover, that she was there with her sons, who I know are kind of now big crypto investors, well known in Turkey. And I got chatting to her, and she's been in the space 6 years. She was who got her sons into this space, and she started trading with 5 USDT. And her and a group of women who were her peers and friends turned that 5 USDT into 25,000. And that was just through educating. And she said, I made loads of mistakes. It wasn't all perfect. But she educated herself on the different products, on what she could do. And there's so many of those stories, not just in Turkey. They're in Pakistan, they're in India, they're in UAE, they're in Saudi, they're in Europe. You see it. You go to Poland, you go to these countries where they're really embracing it and they're there. But I feel like for many who are still just getting into the space, there wasn't that extreme push to have to find a better alternative. So, I feel like that's been a big driving. Now, the wealth narrative still is very important. Like, we know the institutions are embracing it because they see that opportunity. They see the opportunity with the Bitcoin ETFs. It's, BlackRock's most successful product
Yeah, yeah.
of this year. I think I saw Larry share recently on Squawk Box.
Yeah.
Like, so now what's happened is with the traditional entry and with other fintechs entering in because they see it as a potentially a big revenue stream, it's gotten the mainstream legitimacy. So now it's opening up to many more. And that's where but we still are so early. We're still only at 6% globally of
When,
people
when
using
when you
it.
when you think about AI and how AI is kind of, nobody could avoid AI. Okay, nobody can do anything about it being separated out from their lives. It's like, it's whichever way you look, it's going to be part of your life. So you better either embrace it or be left
Mhm,
behind. And the propaganda around that has been very strong.
mhm.
Do you think that because people are seeing AI as technology, that actually helps people think more into digital assets than ever before? Because you have an analog and a digital world.
Yeah,
And now you're bringing into everyone's life this AI-powered digital world that they didn't have in the same way before. Because crypto's out there, it's a bit unusual. AI's out there, it's a bit unusual. You don't have to have crypto. But if you don't have AI, your business could probably go out of business in a very short period of time. So it's kind of sucking in that thinking about tech and versus analog being smarter.
I think everyone is recognizing that as you say, there's no way around not living in a tech-enabled world. Like, and it's only going to accelerate. You know, you could say, okay, Binance has built over 8 years into an incredibly successful business. You know, we recently had MGX make a big investment into us, which is like the ultimate seal of approval, and a sovereign wealth fund makes that investment. But with AI, we're going to see three-person unicorns as businesses. So, and they could be built in the next 6 months. A brand that we don't even know about
Yeah.
suddenly exists. So I do think this deeper education and discussion, like, I think no one can go into whether it's a dinner party or, water cooler chat at your office at the moment without technology coming up in some way. And I do think that the big focus in the media, the big focus online and social media, on podcasts such as this, is normalizing it for people, where they recognize, okay, the traditional systems are all being disrupted. Workplace is being disrupted by AI. Financial system is being disrupted by assets. So we better educate ourselves on it now. And I think what we try and do in the role that we see ourselves playing is, even if you choose not to open up a Binance account, and I know that it's going to sound ridiculous to some people, we want to help educate you to do that. So, 4 years ago, our founders set up Binance Academy. Binance Academy is the equivalent of Masterclass, but focused on digital assets and the blockchain. It's got over 15,000 modules on it, and it is free to access for anyone in majority of languages locally around the world. Not everyone. We're still not perfect, but we had over 43 million people educate themselves on that platform last year.
Wow.
So that just shows you, to your point, people are recognizing now that if we don't want to get left, and no one wants to be left behind. No one wants to be left behind. So I think what I have to do as a marketeer, though, is make sure that whatever stage of your mindset you are about this space, that I'm constantly ensuring that I'm putting the right education, servicing with what you need, whether it takes a week to get you onto the platform or whether it takes 3 years to get you onto the platform. It's about meeting people where they are in their comfort level. Because the last thing that we want as a platform is people to make a big jump into this space, not have the appropriate education, because you do take responsibility yourselves
Yeah.
in this space. We need people to enter into it and really want to enter into it in a way that is suitable for them. So we don't want you to start trading futures if you're really someone that should be just sitting on assets and, using it as, what we call hodling. So I think it's really about how do we tailor all of these messages and the content and the education to ensure that we are helping you get comfortable where you should be. So, but making it fun at the same
You
time.
have to with the glass. I know, I could see.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
hit the camera.
I'm
The
so
camera's
sorry.
changing.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay. Fear mongering as a way of selling something. Okay, a financial advisor might sit down with someone like you and say, "Well, look, you get to 65 years old and you don't have enough
I actually
money."
had that.
Okay, you get to 65 and you don't have enough money. What are you going to do? What happens if your husband dies and you have no life insurance? What about if someone dies and you don't have a will? You know, it's always fear-based sales, and a lot of stuff that has really been profound over the course of the last 5 or 6 years is the traditional financial system is broken. This is the solution to this broken system. And the more fear that's been put into that, and arguably the government's done a great job of making it even worse for themselves over the course of these years too, by increasing the debt and printing money, that you've got essentially people that buy crypto for opportunity or are being forced down the road of crypto because it's fear of what traditional money is going to be. So my dad, he will understand traditional money and understand the bank account. He thinks that the money gets deposited in the bank, it gets its 3% interest per year or whatever it is, and that's safe. You know, nothing's going to happen there. But he doesn't understand maybe how inflation works against what's going on in the marketplace. He doesn't understand how this huge amount of debt that each of these countries have got. And he doesn't look at a country as a business. You know, I look at every country and I say, well, let's say you're a company. Okay, you're a company and you just keep getting more in debt. So as a company getting more in debt, doesn't take rocket science to work out that you'll go bankrupt. And when you go bankrupt, then what do you do? And what you'll do is you'll suffer in exactly the same way that other countries that have gone bankrupt did, which is Zimbabwe is a great example of that, you know, with hyperinflation, whether you want to talk about some South American countries too that experienced that. I remember when I moved to Sao Paulo in 1996, hyperinflation had just finished. People were putting the price up of a loaf of bread 3 times a day in the supermarket. Remember the old sticky labels? And they were doing that 3 times a day. And people, when they got paid their salary at the end of the month, had to spend it all immediately because it was going down in value by the minute, which blew my mind. But it made them incredibly good mathematicians. And so there was some positives that came out of it. But we see all of these bad things that are happening, and you know, and it doesn't matter who tends to be in government now, whether you're blue or whether you're red, whether you're left, whether you're right, whether you're extreme or not. Everyone seems to be going down the same road.
Yeah.
But yet this what was once very scary, unknown, got to be a bit dodgy, this whole crypto world, is now becoming well, hold on a minute. This could be the safety net that maybe you need. This could be your safest, and I can't even believe I say that out loud. This could be your safest investment ever. Do you think that narrative is played into by people in your space and across the companies that do the same thing as you? Or do you think it's just the crypto influencers that are trying to do that to get more people in the gang?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. Look, I do. I meet a lot of people who got into this space. You know, you go to hyperinflation economies like Turkey, and that's the #1 crypto penetration globally is Turkey. And when you look at the early adoption, it was based on individuals trying to protect their wealth because at the moment it is changing 3 or 4 times the price of bread and milk on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, it's 124%.
It's nuts.
But
That and Argentina, Australia.
exactly.
Yeah.
And look, I think a really good analogy is when I moved to New York 2008, and I'd been to New York several
Just
times
after or just
before
before?
that. The week after Lehman
Shit the bed,
Brothers.
really?
The week after Lehman Brothers crashed. And honestly, it's the only reason I was able to stay in New York, because that was the year they had the reduced number of H-1B applications. And it meant that I was able to put in a last minute application and was able to stay.
Get
But I
residency.
would argue that while that was a moment where there was deep fear around finance and many people lost their jobs, you and I both know a lot of people that would have been affected at that, also came the best entrepreneurialism. You know, I would say that was like a golden chapter that decade after in New York, where you saw people who maybe traditionally would have gone into banking, investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, corporate, actually didn't have the opportunity. So they looked at other areas. And, you know, we've seen those incredible businesses that were built out of that all over the world now. But, you know, with crypto, I think a lot of people were originally, going back to what we spoke about earlier, it was an alternative. It was a way of protection, but then it unlocked opportunity, because once you take a step in and you start learning more about the ecosystem and the different types of projects and the different tokens beyond Bitcoin. And you start realizing that many of them are really substantial technology companies where there's a roadmap and they're building products and services that are very specific. It then opens up people's eyes to, oh, well, maybe I'm not just going to be an investor. Maybe I can actually build a new business in
Like,
this space.
it's absolutely right.
And you see that in Turkey at the moment. Like some of the most brilliant innovations in our space are starting to come out of the Turkish market
Isn't that interesting?
because you saw that there's not just, it wasn't just adoption, it ended up being education and then innovation and building is coming. And now you're seeing the Turkish government put really clear regulation in place, which is supporting that ecosystem. So, that happened in San Francisco with Palo Alto. What's not to say that Turkey, and Istanbul becomes a next version of Palo Alto for, the next
Why should they
period.
have the rights on it in Palo Alto anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there's no reason.
So that's what I think is so exciting about this space. It changes all the rules. The financial centers, the entrepreneurial centers. It's not the, traditional hubs that we saw in
So
the
there's
past.
almost like, from a marketing point of view, there's almost some form of strategy work you can do about looking into places with hyperinflation where the faith in the traditional banking system is low, and how you can build. You're already doing it.
I will always
You-
take
you-
advice, but it's through conversation. Like that's the beauty of marketeers. Like marketeers are only good if they're constantly listening and listening to the ideas from the community because some of the best ideas come from people that are non-marketeers.
Okay.
So,
So far in this conversation, okay, there's one thing that's bugging me.
okay.
Okay. I'm
Don't want to bug you. What have I done?
I'm talking to a CMO of Binance. I want to talk to you.
Mhm.
Okay. Because I want to understand, and I think that everybody else would like to understand more about you as a human being. Yes, we understand all of this kind of stuff from Binance point of view. Yes, we have to be careful not to say the wrong things because it's on air, it's being filmed, it's going out to audience. I know all of that, and all of my audience were like, I'm just watching it or listening to it in the car on the way to work. What do you mean everybody else can hear it? but real people are what make companies successful. And it really is always just people with different approaches, different ideas, people with different skill sets, and people with different levels of passion and commitment to get a business to where it needs to be. God only knows with my companies, it is just about people. At the end of the day, the product and the service becomes secondary if people aren't having fun.
Yeah.
You've worked in a number of different companies. Some I'm sure you like more than others. Who was the greatest marketing inspiration to you along the years?
Oof, that's a great question. I was really lucky to work for a company called Havas. And Havas is one of the largest advertising networks in the world. It's number 3 globally, after some like others called WPP and Martin Sorrell, who's well known. It's a French company. But at the time I was there was a CEO called David Jones. And David was one of the youngest CEOs ever of an advertising network. And he identified, so this is 2010, he identified that there was a huge opportunity around profit and purpose. And he was one of the early advisors to Paul Pullman on Unilever, that, as we know, had that very successful period. And I was really lucky to get to work on David's extended team.
Yeah.
And to be able, not only was he a business genius, but he had this power to connect with everyone in the room and then also be able to get to what was the core of the issue or the problem really quickly and then find the right solution. And I was really lucky that even though I was very young, like 25-year-old, thought I was very experienced and mature, but then you're like sitting with like Fortune 500 CEOs in a room. You're like, I probably, should be a little bit quiet here. I just had, it was amazing through osmosis. I took in so much from him.
Yeah.
Because he was able to understand the power of storytelling, how advertising and marketing could actually drive business results. because traditionally marketing had always been like the secondary leadership role in the business, but he really wanted marketing to have a seat at the table. And that's why when I was there, our clients weren't only the CMOs. Like we spoke directly to the CEOs and the board because that was how important. And I think it was early in that stage where I realized the power of listening and the power of understanding that the traditional playbook at that time that we had, it'd been beaten into our head was completely transforming. And that it was going to be the next gen technologies like social media at that time that now is just, part of our everyday lives. It's part of the everyday fabric, but that was going to transform. And he was really innovative in how he did it. And I just enjoyed so much working with him. He now has set up one of the biggest advertising tech companies in the world. So he essentially goes around the world and invests in next generation tech, which is such a natural move for him because of that. But he was an exceptional marketeer as well as being a business leader.
Okay. Let's have a little bit of a debate.
Okay.
You're marketing, I'm sales.
Yes.
No.
Marketing and sales. My first job was sales.
Okay.
I would argue I couldn't be a good marketer without having spent time in sales.
Well, I would argue that I'm a great salesperson and I'm a really bad marketer. Okay. I would argue that I'm that. And I would argue that because I believe sales is hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And marketing requires patience. And these are my reasons. So,
Okay.
so we'll have the debate over it. Yeah. With sales, you identify your target, you aim, you attract, okay? And you go and hunt them down, yeah? With marketing, you're identifying your market. It's almost what I call pull selling as opposed to push selling, okay? You identify your market, you target your market, and you wait for them to come to you on the back of the work that you do. Is that fair, or would you go, that's nonsense, Spence? I'm not having that.
Absolutely disagree. Complete
Yes, okay,
nonsense.
right.
Complete nonsense. I'm going to tell you why.
Come on then.
Marketing is broken into short term and long tail. Okay. A marketeer does exactly the same thing as a salesperson does, just in different mediums. It may not be door to door. It may not be, on the phone. It may not be via email, but we're just using different modes and mediums to connect with those target users. So while you use maybe an email or you use a coffee or you use, that phone call or a gatekeeper, someone who makes the introduction, we're using social media. We're using ad platforms like Google, like Facebook. And oftentimes,
Oh, yeah, but hold on.
we're looking at that in like a 24 to 48 hour to, 7-day period. Like that's what we're in the retail space.
I need to fight this. You as a marketer will use, yes, I understand. We both want the same outcome. So I can agree with that, okay?
The goal is revenue for both.
Yeah, the goal is revenue.
Revenue and
okay?
loyal users.
You run ads on social media, okay? People have to respond to the ads.
Okay.
When I would use social media and I would do DM outreach and not run ads. So I wouldn't have the spend on the ads. I'd run the DM outreach. So let's say you said to me, Spence, I need you to go and get 100 accounts open with Binance. All right, you've got a week. Get to work. Okay. And you said I'm doing it my way and you can do it your way. I would literally go through my 30,000 connections on LinkedIn. I'd go through my 54,000 on Instagram, and I'd start DMing people in my way, thinking about how I can start a conversation with them to get them to be interested.
That's what ads are. That's what ads are.
But
You're opening up a dialogue. You're opening up a dialogue. You're trying to capture their interest. What if that person is an introvert and doesn't want to talk to you, but they may be more likely to see something that sparks something? And then they will open up the dialogue. You just have to make it compelling enough. Both of us are trying to build a compelling reason to open up the conversation. So
you're warming people up one to many. I'm warming people up one to one. I suppose if I'm DMing people individually, your advertising is a one to many approach, isn't it?
It's now, look, traditionally it was. A year ago, I would say too, it was one to many. Because of AI tools now, we're able to be hyper-personalized. Even like it's mind-blowing because it's the holy grail. But some of the AI tools we're using at the moment, we can truly understand where someone is in their journey. I don't want to freak people out with this, but we're able to literally tailor the message down to, knowing that on this moment they're likely to invest, and we can serve an ad up to them that's going to play into that mindset.
And how long have you had that connection with that?
This is all in the last 6 months.
No, how long have you had that connection with that person to know that, or information around that person? How long? Is that days, minutes, hours, what?
It's days.
Shut up.
Yeah. And this is where AI tools are so powerful for budding entrepreneurs. Because you don't, traditionally you're competing with huge marketing budgets and huge teams and Web2 companies. But now you can do this so effectively and with a really lean team. Like you can pull off a global advertising campaign, the like of Coca-Cola, as like a 3-person business and get the same volume of assets out and faster, period.
You're married.
Yes, I
You're a
am.
mother, and you've got a full-time job. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I am first daughter, first granddaughter, first great-granddaughter, and I have 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay, folks, let's talk about real estate. Now, a recent partnership that we've just established on the podcast is with AYS Developers. Luxury properties with high-end finishes from people that really understand the subject. Often in Dubai, you'll find stuff that is maybe substandard. With AYS Developers, you're not going to see that. You're going to see fantastic properties that you can buy, you can invest in, you can make your home on Dubai Islands and other places too. So go visit aysdevelopers.ae and check them out. I promise you it'll be worth the trip. And how many best friends do you have?
I have to be very careful here. I have a new best friend in Dubai today. Is that what you wanted me to say, Spencer?
Whoa, if you're offering.
No, I'm very looking.
This is fascinating stuff, and that's why someone like you has so many incredible insights to share, because you don't realize what you just said, how important that is to a lot of people that are driving home from work right now, listening to this, going, "You what?" Because at the end of the day, every single business owner, the number one goal is revenue, because if revenue comes through the door, they can breathe, they can eat, okay? Everything else can be dealt with as long as there's money coming through the door. Mm-hmm. And so people are constantly thinking of ways, okay, that they can create revenue. Now, interestingly, we used to have stuff that used to come through the door called mail shots, used to come through the letterbox. And those mail shots would come in and there'd be one bill and 9 other things that would get torn up and put in the bin. Mm-hmm. And they'd have fancy envelopes and different designs, Dear Occupy, Dear Homo, all this kind of stuff. And they were chucked in the bin. Mm-hmm. And then people stopped getting post. Nobody got stuff in the letterbox anymore because it was all digital. Now, when stuff comes through the letterbox, everybody opens it.
I love when I get physical items.
Well, isn't that
I tried to do a mailer program here. It's not possible anymore, which is so upsetting. Yeah. But I do think but then it's about surprising and delighting. So, to any budding entrepreneurs, think about how do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out? So, and you made a really good point earlier on that I just want to circle back on. Referral, word of mouth. Leveraging your network. Those are still, whether you're sales, whether you're a a chief tech officer, whether you're a founder, those are the most powerful tools all of us have. If I had one channel that I was restricted to using, it would be referral. And being able to leverage one user to invite another user or multiple and reward that user, because you are driving what is incredible loyalty.
My sales team are going to hate you.
I'm singing.
Because this is what I'm telling them for a long time.
But it's so powerful.
I know.
It's incredible.
I know.
And it allows you to use someone else.
But when you're sold on it, like you and I are, we can't understand why everybody doesn't use it. I'll give you 2 examples of that. So I teach my guys referrals, but I also teach them, if referrals are a struggle, then introducer agreements. So paying people essentially for leads, referral program. So referrals in the financial services and the insurance industry come from, look, I'm on a bit of a mission to solve the problem that exists here. You know people that I don't know. Let me talk to those people, build a relationship, and then let me talk to those people. And every time I see you, think of 2 or 3 people that we can talk to. That's referrals, yeah? Introducers is, okay, we have a program in the company where, and what I do is I ask every company how they get their clients. So I would say, how do you get your clients? Well, we do this, 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 and this. Okay, and what one do you enjoy the most? And everybody likes an inbound lead. Everybody does, like if somebody approaches me. Okay, right. So if you could get more inbound leads, would that be great? Yeah. Okay, well, that's how our business works. We work with inbound leads and our clients give us those leads and we pay them. And so we make sure that you benefit and we benefit. And so, yeah, I know I'm preaching to the converted, but it works, doesn't it?
But it also doesn't always have to be payment because not everyone has funds to allocate that to. Like, let me explain. Like, one of the ways we do that in Binance at scale, you know, there's referral programs, a digital program that you can refer and you'll get an incentive of, $10 for every new refer. But also, we do like 2,500 events a year. And it's not dissimilar to the old Avon model. It's like bring a friend
Yeah.
and we'll feed them, we'll give swag, we promise a fun evening.
Yeah.
And who knows, that might convert into new opportunity.
And
And then if we see that happening at scale, we'll ask those individuals to professionalize. And that's when we turn them into, a term you and I are familiar with, which is affiliates,
Mhm.
which is where they are professional gatekeepers and
Mhm.
referrers. I wish I had known about that job being an option 15 years ago. Because if you're someone who has a strong network, is trusted, is credible, like it's an amazing, amazing way to live a very good life and
Mm.
also do very well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it also would motivate you to build your network even further, just
Yeah.
naturally, because there's other reasons and other benefits from it. There's
Exactly.
there's, there's one thing. There's a lot of problems that exist in the world, and I think one of the biggest problems in the world is that kindness isn't used as much as it
Yeah.
needs to be. And so when we talk about that kind of stuff, if each of your 285 million users was to refer somebody, then you double very quickly. My belief is that it should be law that everyone must be kind to somebody each day. And I believe if every day everybody was kind to one person, whether that was getting a coffee on the way to work for the security guard, or as you grabbed your coffee, stopping to ask somebody how their family is, whatever that may be, the world would be a nicer place to be in. And so it's all about that having an impact on somebody else in a positive way. And whether that's, hey, have you heard about Binance and what they can do and how you can store your assets, or in another way, from wealth management to insurance to whatever it may be. When I look at marketing, I'm talking to, as we go through all of your experience and all of your history and years and years and years of like incredible stuff. I'm sitting talking to a lady that's like, referrals, mate, they're really powerful.
Fundamentals, go back to the fundamentals. And it's so true what you say. We're not going to be very interesting because we're agreeing on a lot of topics here. So I feel sorry
We're
for the
best friends now,
listeners.
anyway.
Exactly. Best friends forever. But what I remember my father took me aside and he said, he knew I was really ambitious and he knew that I had like big goals and, I wanted to do well. And he sat me down on the day I finished uni and said, just remember, you need to treat people well on the way up because you need those people as friends on the way down, which is inevitable. And we've all had like, at that stage, she was thinking more you go up and you go down. You and I both know, it's a volatile roller coaster, the world we live in now. And I think it's the best piece of advice to your point about kindness. Like if we've all had those days where we've been asked to jump on a call with someone to help them on something, that may be unrelated to, it's not going to contribute anything to you. But by just taking those 15 minutes or that 20 minutes to sit and talk through an idea or to be a soundboard or to offer, a moment of advice, it always comes back to you in some way. And I do think I see founders that have operated with that mindset and they tend to succeed to much greater heights than those that are, territorial or don't really spend the time. And I think it's the biggest piece of advice I would give to not just people coming into marketing or business is like those moments of kindness are really what will give back to you ultimately in the long term, whether it be professionally or personally. It's
Well,
key.
it's actually happening right now in this room. So that's taking place.
Yeah.
Okay. We're enjoying each other's company.
Yeah.
We'll remember each other. And I'm pretty sure if I said to you in 3 weeks' time, hey, everybody loved the episode. Can I buy you a coffee? I got a couple of questions for you. You'll be like, sure, Spence. Yeah, come down to Abu Dhabi.
It
Yeah,
is.
let's have lunch.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is how the world works.
And that's
It
where
is.
that connection
And
goes.
that is the beauty of UAE, by the way, because I've lived in several countries. I know you've lived in several countries. When you come here and you realize like everyone, there's a vision here. Like we know that globally it's talked about, the vision, it's clear. But when you come here and what I was blown away by moving over here, especially, coming from Ireland, was everyone wants to help. and wants to like open a door from you
Mhm.
and make sure that, you have a positive experience here
Mhm.
because they see that that will contribute to the greater vision.
What's the other reason?
The other reason I moved here,
No, the other reason people want to help.
well, they also know that it comes back.
I think a lot of people were a beginner here once too,
True. Yeah.
and they came here,
Pay it forward.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then they experienced kindness and people
Yeah.
who were trying to help them, and it's
Yeah.
like, and I think we all feel that,
Yeah.
and it's
Especially with the international
yeah,
community.
yeah,
Yeah. That was said
absolutely,
overtly to me. When I first moved to New York, again, I was like blown away by friends opening up connections to business people that
uh
just happened to be Irish. That, if you call them in Ireland, they never would have sat
yeah,
down
yeah,
with
yeah.
you. But to your point, they'd been you. They'd been in kind of the city and not known, how to manage things or what to do. And I remember I met with, one of the CEOs in Goldman Sachs who was Irish, had done very well, and he offered to sit down with me for coffee. And, I was doing all my prep and my research before going in, being like, what am I going to say to him? It's interesting. This is, and I sat down with him and, you asked me a question earlier on of like, why are you doing the podcast? And I asked him, I was like, why are you meeting with me? I'm not someone that can give anything back to you. And he said, I was 25. I moved to New York. I was ex-army. I had a newlywed. I had no idea how to navigate the city. I'm going to sit down with you and give you advice, and maybe we'll meet a few more times and I'll open some doors to you. But then in 5 years' time, I expect you to do the exact same thing for
Mm.
someone else. And he pulled that favor in. I ended up hiring like 8 interns of like daughters and sons of his friends, but it was transparent.
Yeah,
It was agreed on, playfully
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. But it was like just acknowledgement. Okay, if I help you, there is an expectation. It may come at some stage, but this is about paying it forward. This is about, being that support system. And I do think international, expats are the best version of that.
Mm.
We tend to want
Yeah.
to open up those doors. And I'm very lucky in my situation. I've had the same with Saudi, Emirati, Bahraini friends who have also, they want me to enjoy their country.
Mhm.
So they've opened those doors as well.
Mm. Talk to me about when marketing goes wrong, because many people, small business owners, have grown incredibly frustrated with marketing through digital channels, whether that be SEO, running ads on social media, and I look at agencies now as the modern day equivalent of double glazing salespeople, and it's really hard to choose a really good agency because everybody promises the world. They deliver an atlas, and you don't know who's good and who's not until you've spent the money and it hasn't worked. So when things do go wrong, what steps should people do to protect themselves, or what questions should they ask that they probably don't know to ask, or how can they create a campaign that works?
One point I'm just going to double click on before I answer that question is around agencies. I grew up in agencies. I would argue that agencies set me up to be able to work in the pace of crypto because of like the volume of work, the number of clients, because you're being billed out on 10 clients, even though they think you're only being billed out on one, each
But
of
is
those
there two
individual
types of
clients.
agency? Is there the old Leo Burnett's JWT type agencies, and then all of these new social media
They
5-man
all are
bands?
built on the same premise,
Are
though.
they?
They're all built. And I would argue that the agency model is entirely dead. And that is controversial and it is going to frustrate people. But of the 15 agencies, like big agencies and small agencies, that I personally on my team worked in, of recent, I really struggle to, in our space especially, there's just a lack of discovery in depth that they've done to be able to come to me with ideas that I would argue that if I gave the same brief to an agency as to some of my young interns, I can get better quality work for my interns.
Wow.
That's very controversial, but I do think that agency CEOs need to take a really good look internally and look at what is it that they're missing, or where are the profiles that they need to have to plug that gap, because they still could play a very important role. They just need to innovate faster and operate as fast now as some of their clients, especially in the Web3 space. And we've seen a lot of Web3 marketeers who were on the foundation or the exchange or on the project side now jump to set up agencies because what was the traditional agencies just couldn't keep up. Whether small or big, by the way, couldn't keep up. Like my preference now is to work with 2 or 3 person production shops, work with very small teams where you know that you're going to be a hero client that they treat like a startup and they become fully obsessed by and they you're able to treat them as an extension of the team.
But even if you did that, how do you choose those production shops?
I
How,
I choose look,
what
I
makes
think it goes back to what you said earlier on about people. It's like, if you can get a chemistry, I'll always try and meet, if unfortunately the world we live in, the international world means you're meeting a lot of people online,
Mhm.
but you can still get that chemistry. And if you see that commitment and that drive, and you see, like for me, it's, I look at like speed of turnaround, the originality of the idea. Like we see a lot of agencies send us ideas that it's clear they've been ChatGPT'd, which you know, my 4-year-old
Yeah.
could do that now. I hate to say it. So for me, it's around the original thinking and the passion and the chemistry you have with those people. And if they turn up to the meetup that's on a Sunday night, in Dubai to learn more, they want to speak to your community. That's like that extra level of commitment. And I think that's really, and you see that there's still a lot of companies and agencies that are that, but I think a lot of, a glut of them
If you
have
find
had it very
if you
easy.
find a good one, do they still have a shelf life?
I think most agencies have a shelf life.
So as with that particular
You
client,
need
yeah.
to innovate. So I'll never, in our marketing world, a lot of people have retained agencies. Now that model can work if the people are able to, if on a team you see some rotation. So there's fresh thinking that comes in, but sometimes inertia can set in where the fresh ideas and the fresh commitment aren't there. So I think it's really important to really be acting as an extension of the team and really bring you in because otherwise you don't you need that commitment, you know? Like I love agencies. I loved agencies previously in companies I worked in because they would work 24/7, 7 days a week.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you don't really get that anymore. More relatable to some of, let's say the next generation talent and,
Yeah.
and how they value life. I think we were just operating out of fear from our early ages,
Yeah.
fear of failure, whereas they're much more balanced, probably much better than we are. Um, but I think that like you need that, you need that commitment and that passion on it. But I think from a campaign perspective, you know, marketing goes wrong all the time. We see that. We've had several cases in Binance where we thought something was going to work really well. And we do really thorough testing with like small buckets of our
Yeah.
community to understand. And then it crashes and burns. You just pull it off, you apologize if it's offended, and you move on. Because you have to take the insights you've learned from that to move on. Now, if there's a bigger social media issue or there is, a story that breaks that is, misinterpreted, then you need to really artfully make sure that you are delivering a message that clarifies,
Mhm.
what was the issue and apologizes if you need to. But that's how you also, showing traditionally, I think when I first started in marketing 20 years ago, 24 years ago, like people weren't acknowledging failures. They would either brush it under the carpet and say, no, we'll leave that. We don't want to apologize. Where now I think you have to acknowledge that mistakes can be made and you
So
can
with
be
all
vulnerable.
the cock-ups that took place over the course of the last couple of years, and I call them cock-ups. You can use any term you want at
Crises.
Binance. Uh, crisis,
We
yeah.
had no cock-ups. What are you talking about? No.
Catastrophes that took place over the course of the last few years. Is dealing with those types of problems. It's like just be open, honest, and transparent.
Open, honest, transparent, and collaborate with your users, in our case, the community,
Yeah.
to be able to ensure that you are acknowledging
Okay.
the issue and what you're doing to improve upon it. So,
Can we do the following? Because I want to make sure everybody follows this.
yeah,
And you and I have obviously got a level of understanding of a few
yeah,
things that make it easy for us to
yeah.
flow. If an entrepreneur is looking to use digital strategies, okay, is it critical that the brand has a social media presence as well as the individuals? Yes. Okay. Is it critical, okay, that they run a digital marketing strategy for brand awareness regardless?
No, it is not critical.
Okay, why not?
It is not critical because it depends on what the product, like, you can build organically. And that's through channels like word of mouth and
Yeah,
through gatekeepers and through influencers online. You
yeah.
don't need to pay for play for everything. One of the best examples of that in our space is Solana. They do zero paid marketing. What they do really well, they do incredible video content and what we would term in marketing as brand campaigns.
Mhm.
They do social media content that captures your imagination and is fun and entertaining, and lots of memes that, as you're scrolling, it stops you. And they do brilliant events online and offline. And that's the core of their strategy.
Okay.
And they have done that and built, Solana based on that premise, never ever doing a paid digital strategy.
Okay. So, and what if there were three questions that you should be asking an agency? What are those three most important questions to see whether that agency is going to be good for you?
Describe me in a sentence. Who do you think I am as a brand from the company perspective? What's going to make me truly differentiated? How do I stand out? That's going to stress test their creativity and their ideation. And how are you going to measure that success? What do you think is the important way of measuring that?
Okay. Next thing, okay, let's take a case study of something that went horribly wrong. Okay, we won't use Binance. It's okay, okay, or any of those. Let's take Jaguar.
I actually was going to refer to them earlier on when I was talking about campaigns gone wrong.
Because that I mean, it's probably the most public, calamitous downfall known to any advertiser. I mean, that will be for the next 2 or 3 generations.
The reference point for
what
when
not to
marketing
do.
goes wrong.
What did they do? How did they get to the point of making such a massive mistake, in your professional opinion?
And I don't know the team behind it. I used to work on Jaguar. That was one of my first brands when I first came into Havas at the time. And, my biggest observation, they did not recognize who their core audience is and who their loyal fans are. That was and they didn't do the understanding. What they did was build a campaign around who they wanted their audience to be. So what you did in that case is you alienated the fan base and the core loyalists who have supported your brand. And
Bought
we
the
all
Jag
know,
over and over.
but we know
years and
those
years.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
They were hardcore,
Mm.
and they loved it. And they loved it because it was heritage and it, represented, a world before, and it was classic, and it was, artistry through the lens of, what cars used to be, and they they just went down this hyper disruptive, diverse route that alienated this group and then didn't appeal, was forced on what they thought were going to be their new generation of users. Now, I'm all for taking risks, but if they had done any testing, and I'm not talking about formal, advertising testing that some people will be familiar with, where you go into a paid focus room. If they had just gone and tested this with some of their, some of the local car retailers,
Yeah.
they would have recognized that. And they just misunderstood and misinterpreted what their legacy audience and what their new audience wanted. And it's really upsetting because I think Jaguar is a lovely heritage brand that still
But
plays a role.
but they also were on trend in the moment, as in on when you look at it with diversity, inclusion. I mean, we can say it in the UAE because
But it was checklist.
But
It was all
but
checklist.
yeah. But they were on point with all of the nonsense that was going around in the world at that time. Okay, and it only lasted a number of months if we really narrow it down. And so it's almost like, the trend, Labubu, whatever it is. It's almost like
I love a
that-
Labubu. I love a Labubu. I brought 25 of them in my suitcase back to Ireland. Not joking. If I'd been stopped in customs, literally they would have thought I'm a Labubu trader. Like I brought
To anyone that's watching this in 2030
so
that have picked this
depressing at
up.
my age. They were not from me. They were from my friends' children in Ireland. They're very coveted back home.
But it was like there was this moment, and this moment, whoever was in charge of doing that, okay, I believe came from that world, because they had been sold on it so much that they believed it was the future. And I believe there was so much bias at that time by whoever was involved in that and supporting that, that's why they missed the mark with Jaguar, because they didn't say to themselves, like you said, who buys Jags?
But that goes back to you knowing who your audience is and knowing who you are. You can evolve as a brand and transform, and modernize.
Yeah.
But that was too much of a flip. And I do agree with you. It was like watching an ad that was a checklist of everything that we were meant to, that was meant to be appropriate at that time. And also the storytelling didn't resonate. Like when I watched the ad, I was like, what am I meant to feel or think after that?
Yeah.
For me, I was like, ooh, that just feels, and look, I can't even imagine what that head of marketing went through, because they did their best. They did what they thought was right. They just missed the mark. So I do want to be fair to that they genuinely thought they were doing the right thing. Like, I don't think they would have pushed that, but it was just not knowing who the audience is and not reading the data and the insights.
Have you ever been part of a howler like that?
I had one little howler, yeah, in my early days of Binance. And it was one that still makes me uncomfortable bringing it up. So I'm going to overshare now. But it was actually, we have a big issue. While there are a lot of women working in crypto and a lot of women who are builders in crypto, there still is a lack of everyday women investing in crypto. So as a woman in crypto, there's a personal mission there to how do I bring more women, my friends, my peers into this space. Now, women are traditionally conservative. They're risk averse. So it's counterintuitive for them to invest in our assets.
Yeah.
But we have to, and they also don't have the time with mental load to educate themselves on this space. And that's not, like, there's still a very healthy minority in the space. But when I survey my male and my female friends, majority of my male friends are in some capacity. I would say 5% of my friends, from uni and from school are in it, which is bizarre because, they've all, I'm very lucky that I had this group of friends that's done extraordinarily well, and very happy people. But they're like, oh no, it's not for us. So we decided to do a campaign for International Women's Day it was meant to be playful, and it was meant to be calling out women in a playful way and a bit controversial of, you'll stop and pay attention to what is the latest beauty or fashion trend, but you won't take accountability for your financial future. And we set up, and it was in Bahrain, we set up what was meant to be like a perfume station. And we launched the Binance Perfume.
No.
And we had individuals that were stopping people, and people all stopped. Women were stopping. And then we pivoted the conversation to be like, hey, this isn't actually about perfume, it's about crypto. And you could suddenly see, women really irked. Now, I liked it because it was meant to be a campaign designed by women for women to kind of call out the fact that we don't always focus on the right things. We launched it on CryptoX. But what happened was the crypto bros took offense to it. They were like, this is missing the mark. It is definitely designed by a man. Which is so ironic because the whole team was women behind it. And it got cancelled on CryptoX before it had even penetrated. We've got 14 million followers on CryptoX. Before it had even penetrated like Instagram and the other social platforms. And from what went from being like our community really excited about the fact that we launched a perfume, when we added a little bit more meaning to it, they got really upset.
Wow.
And I got completely cancelled for 24 hours. And what was really ironic is it made mainstream global news in the
Really?
trades. So for about 48 hours, I was frustrated at myself for not, and there had been other things that had been going on. As you know, our industry had a lot of volatility and a lot of headwinds. There had been other regulator issues that were going on that week. So I'd like not been as deeply involved in the launch of the campaign as I should have. You know, we shouldn't have launched in Crypto X. We should have just gone out on Instagram and on YouTube, which is where the audience that we wanted to see this campaign were. They weren't there. But for my 48 hours, I was like, oof. You know, it was because I hadn't had as big a faux pas as that. But, you know, I spoke to a couple of peers in the industry, you know, made a statement and acknowledged, you know, we're sorry, we missed the mark. You know, we're moving on from this. We're going to take account. We're still committed to bringing more women into crypto. We're not going to stop doing that, but we'll be more thoughtful around how we do it. So I ate my humble pie
Yeah.
and I apologized and I learned from that. But I also am a big believer in failing faster.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that still made Binance the most talked about brand in mainstream ad trades for a week.
Yeah.
So,
There's the upside of that as well.
so what was really interesting is some of the marketeers that I respect most internationally came out with supportive messages for me saying what she did got everyone talking about Binance for 72 hours. So from our lens point, while it may not have been perfect, you know, it was good marketing. So it was amazing that when I acknowledged it wasn't right and it wasn't the perfect execution, how that community of individuals that maybe traditionally wouldn't have supported us came around and supported.
That's really
So it
interesting.
was really interesting. But for me, you know, I really believe that it's failing faster.
Talk to me about
Learning
how,
moments.
because I want to wrap it up shortly because I know we've been talking for a long time, but I could sit and talk to you for hours. You're
Likewise.
fantastic. Okay, it's really enjoyable chatting to you. How long does stuff actually stay in the news anyway? Nowadays, I mean,
Cycles are like anything from 3 hours to 30 minutes sometimes. Like it's phenomenal to stay newsworthy in our current society where where everything is saturated is virtually impossible unless it's something incredibly interesting, like a Labubu. I kid. No, but I don't jest. You know, I think to stay relevant, like you constantly, it's newness. So that's where when I talked about consistency earlier on, you need to constantly bringing, like in our case, new products, new services, new things to talk about, but you need to marry that with the consistency of the message.
I only watch television on my phone. I go to the movies if I want to watch something on the big screen. We don't hardly ever put the TV on. And I remember 6 or 7 years ago, there were 4 or 5 tellies in the house.
Yeah.
There's now one, and I put it on for the Formula One and a couple of sporting events, but that's it. Me too. Okay. And
I was before everyone else though as well.
you were before everybody else.
Yeah, before like everyone suddenly has recognized that Formula One is an incredible global sport.
Well, do you know Sonia Irvine? You know Sonia? She's one of my oldest friends.
Well, that's how I got into crypto. I was
Through
F1 was
Sonia?
my no, well, not Sonia, but inversely because I knew Eddie back in the day. My stepmom was married to a Formula One driver, so it used to be on in our household at the
Who?
time. Derek Daly, who was
Right.
part of Eddie Jordan's team. So
So you know Sonia?
I've met Sonia. Yeah,
I used to live in Monaco, so that's why I know.
small world. There we go.
25 years ago.
But F1 was how I got into crypto. The F1 were my client, and all of the crypto brands were coming into F1. At the time, we were doing Liberty Media just acquired. It was about making it
Yeah, yeah.
mainstream. So everyone wanted to understand how they could use F1 because a technologically advanced sport, a technology-based business. So I owe F1 a lot.
Okay.
So that's a whole other
So
conversation.
I was a Nigel Mansell fan when I was young, and one year when I'd become successful enough, I decided to do every race. And so I traveled around the world with a friend of mine. I was living in Sao Paulo. My friend was living in Buenos Aires, and we would go to every race. And back then, there were only 16 races. And we did these whole 16 races, and we're thinking, well, this is the coolest thing in the world to do. After 16 races, we'd done enough for a while. But we because we'd been staying in the same hotels, we started to part of the circuit.
Right,
So this guy,
teams.
so half the teams that we were drinking with and partying with and ending up in all kinds of strange places with, and in these different
Those
parts
guys
of the
know how to
world.
party, all those teams.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, Amber Lounge and everything else. But anyway, you've taken me completely off track. I was trying to talk to you about something else. What was I trying to talk about? I've completely forgotten. I said about Formula One. Television. Right.
Television, sorry.
So I'm watching stuff on my television. So I like grand designs. That seems, if I like grand designs, that comes up over and over and over again. I get more and more episodes of grand design. So I'm getting fed the stuff that I'm looking for. If I'm a producer of content, which arguably I am, if it doesn't fall into the narrative of the stuff that's interesting for me to consume, somebody else's, I'll never hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you penetrate me and my feed in a way that will get my attention? Do you understand what the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is actually going back to like sports, entertainment, and cultural zeitgeist. That's how you do it. It's looking at what are the big culture drivers and news drivers and what is popular at that moment, and using those passion points, and whether it be, the football season kicking off and building a, Binance football content, or whether it be Formula One, the kickoff, and doing something that's interesting where that partnership, say with a Binance and one of those topics that's relevant for you, suddenly grabs your attention.
Got it.
And then suddenly you may say Binance and type in Bitcoin or crypto, and then we're able to start following you and messaging to you in a more relevant way.
Okay.
But we look at, so on a daily basis, obviously we're obsessed with what's happening in crypto and what's happening, business and economically wise, but I'm also obsessed with what's happening culturally, and we do that at a local level. So
that too, yeah.
Yeah. So Oscars, Grammys, how do we capitalize? We call it trend catching. So it's looking at what's mainstream at that moment and how can we insert Binance and crypto into that conversation in a way that is appropriate and relevant and relatable. Not like just pushed on top, if that makes sense.
Got it.
So having like a commentary or perspective on that, that's one of the main ways you do it. And that's like mass marketing. That's how, you really start permeating culture and trying to insert yourself into what is the cultural zeitgeist.
Rachel, thank you so much for coming to join us today on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic having you. I've got a question before we finish. I don't think I've explored enough here. And I wonder if you would be kind enough to come back on the show in a couple of months' time, once we've got, because I know that there's going to be a shit ton of questions that come to us from this, to come and answer some questions directly from our audience. Okay, and see if you can add some value to those people too. Would that be something you'd be prepared to do?
I would happily come back and do that. And likewise, we have a big activation happening at Abu Dhabi. So maybe we can have you come record one of the shows on the boat in Abu Dhabi F1.
Amazing.
So we'll give you something you like back. No, thank you very much for the kind invitation and for having me today.
It's been great having you on the show. Really, it has. And your insights are fantastic. And people have got some real takeaways from this. And that's what I wanted to get. I didn't want it to be all about crypto. And you literally nailed it. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Allsop and Allsop, Dubai's leading and largest real estate brokerage. They've been in business for 16 years and they have created 153 millionaires within their organization. The top earners in the company are taking in over 10 million dirhams in commission annually. Now, has that got your attention? Because it gets better. If you're considering a change in career or you're looking for your next step, there literally is only one choice. Life at Allsop and Allsop offers unlimited tax-free earning potential and an unmatched high-performance culture that you'll find in no other brokerage here in the UAE. They're there because they're designed to unlock your full potential. Be trained by the best to become the best. You'll be working with a hand-picked team of real estate experts who really are the best the industry has to offer. There's no wonder they have the strongest retention in the industry. Are you ready to change your life? Get in touch with Allsop and Allsop. Keep moving.